Hello, I'm Charlie Towns, the present mayor of Colonial Heights. As a lifelong resident of Colonial Heights, I've seen many changes come to our city. I invite you to join me as we reminisce about some of our memories, starting as a few scattered homes and farmland, to a town in 1926, a city in 1948, a first-class city in 1961, the development of South Park in the late 80s, and finally the present. So sit back and relax as our citizens recall a simpler time when life moved at a slower pace. The memories of Colonial Heights, a great place to live.
The Boulevard has been here for as long as anyone can remember. It was here at the corner of Ellerslie Avenue that a little one-room schoolhouse was built more than 100 years ago. Today, this ribbon of road does more than connect Richmond and Petersburg. It alone stands as a unifying monument to the people of Colonial Heights and their memories.
We were only just a couple hundred feet off the Boulevard, and we could see everything that went on. But those old streetcars used to come down, you could hear them coming. And I remember my aunt would send us a postcard saying that she was coming over to visit us from Richmond. And we'd sit there at the window of the house and wait for that streetcar. And we'd see that streetcar stop, we'd run up there and meet her. But, you know, those streetcars stopped running in about 1936.
In those days, the traffic was very limited. I believe number one was still 2 lanes. And we used to bum a ride, get out there about 8:30 in the morning and bum a ride to Petersburg High, and we were never late, because Mr. Wolf, who was the principal of Petersburg, would not tolerate it. And also bum a ride back home. And we also, the streetcar, you catch a streetcar from Hopewell and go to Petersburg, then Petersburg to Richmond, then Richmond to Ashland.
I moved to Colonial Heights in 1956, but I had lived in Ettrick previous to that, and I had a business license in Colonial Heights, and it started in '53, I believe. So I got to see a lot of changes come too. So when you go up the Boulevard now, you just can hardly recognize anything that was there before. But I know when you used to come over the bridge from Petersburg, first thing you'd see was Danny Gregory's junkyard with all the junk in the world. Plus, next to that was the old Dr. Pepper bottling company, and I used to do some work in that for him when I was back in those days. And of course, as you progressed up the hill, it was Lee Storage service station on the hill and the Conical on the other side. Of course, Mr. Dishman had his little place that's still there today.
On the left-hand side was Stone's grocery store, and across the street from Stone was Landrum's grocery store, which was later Taylor's grocery store. Then on the other corner was the Gulf service station. I don't remember who ran there. Then there was Cecil Williams ran, this was another service station that Uli Brown and his daddy ran on the corner of Westover and the Boulevard. And then across from the Boulevard there, later on, Mr. Daniels, the policeman, used to live on the corner, but moved his house over and built a pool hall there. And then from across the street from the pool hall, it was a Gulf station, and then the Texaco station was right next to that. And then Cecil Williams had a service station.
I guess that's when the changes really started in Colonial Heights. When I was here, then we had two truck stops on the boulevard, one on one side of the boulevard, one on the other side. That was one of the truck stops there, and it was a skating ring. All that's been torn down and been replaced. Across the road, they tore it down and built Sambo's. And that's lasted for a while, and it mysteriously burned down one night while I was working.
And that's where First Colonial Bank is now on the Boulevard.
Basically, all the business on the Boulevard concentrated, say, from Temple Avenue south. It was things north of Temple Avenue, but not as much as there are today. The Boulevard had a lot of people cruising up and down. Of course, in my younger years, I understand that we didn't have Interstate 95, and the Boulevard traffic was tremendously heavy. But today, even though we have Interstate 95, with more business increasing on the Boulevard, the traffic is getting heavier and heavier.
In that area of town still, a lot of the buildings are still there. You used to have Cross Sticks grocery store right at the corner of Hamilton where that was a grocery store. And I used to work for all the delivering. They had E.C. Allen up at the corner where the Texaco station is on the boulevard, and he lived upstairs from the grocery store. And we used to deliver in a 48 Plymouth and a 50 Plymouth, deliver groceries all around. And of course you had Pickadees, which I delivered for also. And then the only place you could get employment really just about, it was carrying papers back. And so I carried papers for about 10 years. Carried it on the Boulevard, Bradshaw, Windsor, 60-something. Then I graduated up to a 225 paper route. The biggest one in Colonial Heights was Lee, Lafayette, and Hamilton.
Who would have thought that our church has been built in the area where Greenleaf Dairy was? Cows actually roamed the fields and the farm where our church is here in Colonial Heights today. Who would have thought that I would have shot squirrels in the very place that our business grew up here, the funeral home here in Colonial Heights, and the backside of Sneed Avenue, where there was 3 Spanish houses, and that was the only houses there in those days. The Capital Truck Station was across the street from our place, and it was the only lighted place on the boulevard in those days that I was able to stop at 4 o'clock in the morning and gather my momentum while I was carrying early newspapers. But there are many things that I remember. The old boulevard, as some of the others might have mentioned at this particular point, was Tucker Martin's 2-pump service station there on the boulevard right at Richmond Avenue. His family lived across the street from it, where Martin Oldsmobile is today.
Back then there was no 95. The boulevard was the main route from Florida to Maine. And very often, every weekend in the summer, you had traffic backed up 3 and 4 miles trying to get into Petersburg. And of course, we had no high school at that time. So to get to high school, we had to catch the city bus because there was no bus, no school bus system. And we would ride over to Sycamore Street, get off the bus, walk up to Washington Street to the high school, and in the evening do the same thing. And of course, many of the old hangouts that were here are gone. Arnett's restaurant is gone, and the theater is gone. That's now the post office.
Colonial Heights grew, in my opinion, in cycles. It seems that as far back as I can remember that the grocery stores, well, nothing but grocery stores on the boulevard from one end to the other. I'm sure some of my viewers here will remember Mr. Angel's store down near the top of the hill. There was Mr. Bushong's store up at Norfolk Avenue in the boulevard. There was Fred Landrum's store on the boulevard. There was Mr. Stone on the boulevard. And of course, Mr. Allen up at Fairfax. In fact, I worked for Mr. Allen. Used to deliver groceries on a bicycle and carry 5 gallons of kerosene oil on it, which was quite a task to do. I always got it there safely, though. But it seems that that cycle passed, and then Colonial Heights was taken over by service stations. I think it was a service station on every corner in Colonial Heights. And from that cycle, it seemed to move into barbershops.
There were about 10 or 11 grocery stores on the boulevard, beginning at Dishman's and extending up the boulevard. And they were independent stores except for the A&P, and these other grocers even extended credit, which was an unknown thing really back in those days. And the Dixie, as for restaurants, the Dixie Pig restaurant was down on the boulevard, and in 1936 the song Boo Hoo was very popular. And I do not remember if we had an anti-noise ordinance in Colonial Heights at that time, but we lived on Carroll Avenue just up the hill from the Dixie Pig, so every night at 11 o'clock I'd call down there and say, please pull the plug out of that jukebox. And they did oblige me.
I can remember when the old streetcars ran from Richmond to Petersburg, and the 2-lane highway from Richmond to Petersburg, the old Prospect Heights School, the old cotton mill. It was over on Swift Creek at the dam where the waterworks are now. And I remember when Lakeview Avenue was dirt, Ellerslie Avenue there were dirt roads, just a very few houses on each.
I guess where we lived on our side of the boulevard in those days was maybe what you'd call the wrong side of the track, you know. I guess maybe the more affluent folks lived over on the other side of the boulevard. All I know is when we got a pair of skates for Christmas, we didn't have any sidewalks to skate on, so we had to go across the highway and get over on Hamilton Avenue and Suffolk Avenue to find any sidewalks to skate on, you know.
I lived on the boulevard right across from Lakeview Avenue, where Lakeview Avenue comes into the boulevard now. When I went to school, across the road there was a tobacco field. Now, you're not supposed to raise tobacco now, but you did then. And many years later, Landers built a grocery store service station there. My father worked on a railroad, and this was a railroad house, as they all were. They were gray, trimmed in brown, and they all stood out like a sore thumb. Yeah. But we never thought anything about it. I just enjoyed being a creeker. And the worst thing about it, when I grew up, everybody had a garden, and I was the only child, so I had to work in the garden, and I didn't like that.
We moved into Cooksfield, and I would guess it wasn't over a dozen houses in Cooksfield. To identify what Cooksfield was, it's the area west of the boulevard in the area of Temple Avenue. And at Temple Avenue was about the most northern part of Cooksfield.